Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about 5 of the best campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. And one of the things that I will consider quite heavily for this video is replayability, because it's one thing to have a campaign that you play once, you get a good experience, and then you're like, I am never gonna do that again. Like, say for instance, Balthazar Gelt. Great campaign, great character, great faction effects, Empire with a rework from Franz, really good race. But I've played that campaign once, and I'm done with it. It's a question of choice in a campaign. It's the question of flexibility in terms of the things you're doing, and to some extent the kind of opponents that you're dealing with. Now, mind you, if you're playing the game properly, regardless on which difficulty, modded, unmodded, the footage over here is modded because I run with mods, but all the same, having a more dynamic campaign experience, I think, is important. So at number 5 over here, we have Morathi. Now, the Dark Elves are considered not so great of a race by quite a few people in the community, but I think a lot of people genuinely misunderstand how good the Dark Elves are as a race. They're really strong as a race. They're ridiculously strong in terms of the economy. While they may not necessarily have the best endgame units, and certainly a DLC could help with that, they do have a significant amount of early game power. They have a great deal of flexibility with their heroes, and a great flexibility with unit recruitment early on, especially with the Black Ark. So there is a significant amount of potential. So that's one of the reasons you should play Dark Elves. But why Morathi? Well, Malekith's campaign can feel one-dimensional at times, beat up everything over here, and then march on Ulthuan. But here's the interesting thing about the Dark Elves. You have a great deal of variety from a diplomatic standpoint if you're playing a Dark Elf campaign. And Morathi in particular, because she starts over here with Lustria to herself, she has more than what Malekith has to deal with. Because, yeah, with Malekith, it's kind of like, okay, I can ally Grumbrindle, but then I'm likely to end up in a war with Valkia. Hellebron is annoying to deal with from a diplomatic standpoint, and you're likely going to face a Leafanar. Whereas if you're playing Morathi, you have a ton of choices, like ally Mazdamundi, ally Astankia, ally X, Y, and Z. There's so many factions over here you can make good diplomatic relations with, because one of the crucial aspects of High Elves is, while they're not well liked as a race, they're not universally despised by most races. In fact, only a handful of races actually despise them, principally the High Elves. So that means you can make diplomacy work in quite a fantastic way when you're playing them, and in particular Morathi, because of her starting position, is well suited towards making that particular playstyle work. Like, some of the things I've done in the Morathi campaign are ridiculous, like ally half the world and fight chaos, or ally all of the chaos factions and fight the Order Tide. You have those kind of choices. The only factions you are forced to fight are the High Elves, but that's roughly about it. And given your proximity to Ulthuan, you can deal with Ulthuan fairly quickly and open up a lot of possibilities in the longer term, and you have a good amount of territory that's suitable, so by the time you actually end up in Bretonnia, for instance, or other territories, you will have such a strong economy that you won't necessarily be affected too badly by climate. So that is one of the benefits in this particular campaign, and why I'd strongly recommend it. Strong character, strong race, strong faction available with a lot of choices to be made. My recommendation: wipe out Astankia, take all of this territory for yourself, ally Mazdamundi, ally Katep, destroy Silostra, destroy Tarax, but you can play this in many, many different ways. Just worth pointing that out. At number 4, we have Grimgor. Yes, even before Omens of Destruction is released, Grimgor's campaign is genuinely one of the best campaigns in the game. It feels so very iconic, but beyond the fact that it feels so very iconic to Grimgor just smashing stuff up, fighting a lot of foes, this is not about diplomacy. This is about who the hell you can beat up. How many people can you beat up? And it is a great deal of fun, because you can fight other greenskins to forcefully confederate their territory through the Greenskin Confederation mechanic. You can end up in a war with Tamarkan, Kolek, all of the cast dwarves, all of the ogres, all of Cathay. It might be a military-centric campaign, though don't underestimate the possibilities of diplomacy in this campaign as well. But then again, Grimgor does not care about diplomacy. Grimgor will conquer and burn the entire world to the ground if he can. But regardless, there are a lot of possibilities over here in terms of the territory you can control in order to win. So there are some, you will need to take some pieces of territory, but consider this is just for the short campaign victory condition. For the long campaign victory condition, you just need to take a certain number of settlements and then basically ensure every minor greenskin faction gets wiped out, which will always happen in every campaign. That means, unlike so many other campaigns where you might theoretically have freedom of choice, but in reality you're restricted because of the victory conditions, in a campaign as Grimgor, you have a ton of choices. Yes, you do need 5 of these settlements to be sure, right? So you do need to take some of these settlements, absolutely. But consider where these settlements are, how different the locations are. It's not like they're settlements close to each other. That gives you flexibility in this campaign, which is great. And besides, Grimgor is just the powerhouse of a legendary lord, and you can really feel that Creative Assembly has put in a lot of effort into making his campaign freaking awesome. Which they have. Like, when Immortal Empires came out, it already turned out to be one of the best campaigns. Then Chaos Dwarfs came out, and that just made them better. And then Tamarkan came out, and for a while, Grimgor was ridiculously strong. They nerfed that, but still, Grimgor is freaking Grimgor. Few legendary lords can take Zarnagrund as early as he can, in a legitimate way, without cheesing various siege mechanics. Grimgor just wins. That is this campaign in a nutshell. Win against everyone. And you get to decide where you want to win. Like, you have reasons to go in multiple directions. Maybe you should go in multiple directions. Maybe try and take those risks. Like, okay, expand everywhere. Go to war with everyone. You can win this. Like, that's a ridiculous aspect. Might take you a couple of turns to start going, because greenskins do get a really fun roster after a couple of turns. But geez, once you get going, you get going, and it is a biblical tide of death and destruction that greenskins do have available to them right now. What they'll have after the improvements, rework for the greenskins, we have no freaking idea. But I hope CA doesn't screw them over. Hopefully not. And number 3, it is Deathmaster Snikch of the Skaven. Out of the races that made the transition from Warhammer 2 into Warhammer 3, I would say Skaven are one of the best races in the game flat out. Huge diversity of roster, very different playstyles. One of the problems, though, in Skaven campaigns, for the most part, is their starting positions, at least for the interesting legendary lords. Like, you look at Skaven Blight, you look at Hellpit, not really great starting positions. Then you have Snikch, who already starts in one of the best areas in the campaign with an actual proper province to work with, and quite a bit of money to work with as well. This is great. You may have to fight Cathay in this campaign, but that's kind of it. Beyond that, you have choices. Well, Cathay and Guild, really. But beyond that, and also destroying Nakai, which you may not have to do because the AI is quite capable of doing that for you, you do have choice. And choice not necessarily in Cathay itself, but also outside of Cathay. See, one of the things about Skaven Legendary Lords is that they're so far apart from each other that ensuring a confederation or even managing to deal with them in the first place can be tricky. Now, Snikch is certainly far apart from the others, so he can go to Lustria to get Skrolk. But here's the thing with Snikch. He does get clan contracts, which quite crucially give you vision with the factions you're dealing contracts with. So the major Skaven factions, with the exception of Tretch, who gives a shit about Tretch, the major Skaven factions, you'll be able to gain vision with them. And because Skaven have the ability of improving their diplomatic relations with each other through a lord choice, well, you kind of start to understand the notion that yes, it is very possible to confederate other Legendary Lords of the Skaven if you are playing as Snikch. Graciers, sure, may not necessarily be the most interesting lord choice, but they do have Envoy of the Council, which is substantial. And then also these clan contracts can give you extra diplomatic relations with these factions, potentially allowing you to confederate these major factions of the Skaven, which can add a good amount of, a different campaign experience than you would encounter in any other Skaven campaign. Because every other Skaven campaign, you're dealing with your own stuff. You're not necessarily considering, oh, maybe I confederate, say, Clan Mulder through just Vision, and then I have to deal with their entire situation. Beyond that, Snikch is just freaking awesome. His ninja Skaven style and not having to deal with loyalty, as well as having armor-piercing projectiles for Night Runners and Gut Runners does give him a significant amount of power. The one downside is that initially other non-Nation units are very, very expensive to recruit, because to recruit, though, not to maintain, quite crucial. So you may be paying quite a bit extra to recruit non-Nation units, true, but once you do enough contracts, you'll be able to handle that. And besides, Eshin units are quite good, and there's a lot of really good stuff that you can use over here when you're just talking about them. So this is a campaign that even from a starting position, there's a lot of choices you can make from a start position situation, and then you have more flexibility that gets added the more you play this campaign. And things can play out in a very different way in this campaign. So it's a fun play style, good Legendary Lord, unique mechanics, and just a lot of choices to be made over here. At number 2, we have Emperor Karl Franz. Fun fact, I started covering Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires because I was looking at the recommended campaigns and it had Karl Franz in there. I considered that a big joke. Karl Franz is not a campaign for beginners. At least it wasn't back then. Nowadays, different situation entirely with respect to that. Very different as a situation and a much better campaign. And what's great about this campaign is you do have a lot of choices and a lot of ways of playing this campaign. Part of it is your long campaign victory condition. The short campaign, pretty straightforward. Fight the vampires who hate you and you hate them, so not really a problem. You would naturally do so. But long campaign, unify the empire, basically, the territories of the empire. Or have military allies to do so, which matches perfectly well with imperial authority, so not really an issue. But how you manage to do it, who you fight, who you screw over, who you ally, who you don't ally, those kind of choices are up to you. Which territories do you focus on? Which territories don't you focus on? Do you try and defend everything, or do you let certain portions of the empire fall so you can reclaim them later on? There are a significant amount of choices, and that's just in the empire itself with the factions that you're dealing there. But here's the thing. You then have choices with not just, who you give various items to through the electric count system, but you have various choices through the Emperor's decrees over here. And the thing that's great over here is you can confederate electric count factions initially, but then you can confederate every other Imperial faction with Unify. And that means, even if you don't ever set foot in Lustria, you can potentially get Marcus Wolfhard. Or you can get Gelt. And in particular, you might be able to get Gelt because Cafe caravans move through the Empire, typically, and so you might be able to get Vision by allying them. Those kind of things. So you have those kind of decisions to make in an Imperial campaign. And then you have various other, like Electoral Machinations as system based on the Matters of State mechanic that was added to Yanbo in Shadows of Change is a great system. It's just Shadows of Change sucked, and Yanbo's campaign, Cafe campaigns are not necessarily the best. But the idea of like having, the system of various bonuses that you use for a currency is a really solid idea in quite a few ways. Experience, growth, recruitment benefits. It adds a lot of diversity to your campaign on the campaign map. Sure, Elspeth and Gelt may have better diversity of troops. Gelt with all those mages and special abilities with those mages. Elspeth with all the special units only she can recruit. But Karl Franz has diversity in terms of building up the Empire itself. He really does feel like the Emperor of the Empire in a lot of ways. And I think it is a very thematic campaign. It is a campaign with a lot of choices and consequences, even if you might be focused heavily on the Empire in itself, which can be a bit of a downside, you know, because you may end up spending a good portion of the campaign just in the Empire, but you don't necessarily have to. It's kind of worth saying this. Yes, eventually you want to unify the Empire, but, you know, you have Bretonnia, you have territory that you can expand in such a way that you end up over here in Camry. If you want to, you have jungle, if you ever want to go to the jungle. So there are many different ways of playing this campaign that don't just involve sitting on your ass in the Empire for the entire purpose. As long as Imperial authority doesn't decrease to, like, in decline, which is, by the way, fairly difficult to do. As long as you don't get to that kind of point, you should be pretty okay in how you play this campaign, the various choices you have, the various different ways of pulling it off. Very iconic campaign and heavily recommended. It would, in point of fact, be number one, except that the number one campaign has something more to it. And finally, at number one, it would be Malakai Makaisson of the Dwarves. Now, from a thematic perspective, this is the Gotrek and Felix campaign, and boy does it deliver on that fantasy of playing Gotrek and Felix. You do start with Gotrek and Felix, so that's already adding to it, but really it's the mechanics of this campaign that really sell it. So here's the thing. Dwarves are a great race, and a lot of their legendary lords are really fun to play at the moment. Especially given the meta of Warhammer 3. Because see, one of the problems of Warhammer 3's meta is how do you make things more interesting the longer the campaign goes on. Because you might have great legendary lords like Oxyatl, but you play Oxyatl's campaign, and yeah, he has great mechanics, but then you realize you're just obliterating everyone because you're teleporting all over the place, beating someone up, and then leaving, which, yeah, kind of removes any sense of challenge in that particular campaign on any difficulty you're playing. In Malakai's case, you don't have that capability, but you do have fairly dynamic campaign experience as the Old Dwarves because of the grudge system. I know it may not have been the most popular system for a lot of people, but here's the thing. This system incentivizes the player to not just sit on their ass and play the intern button simulator. This already is a good thing. And you get more variety with units and the Grudge Settler army if you do well with it. You don't have to play with this system, but it's still a great system. And then you add the deep system. You have a lot of systems for longer campaigns. Now, there's still plenty of problems in terms of making longer campaigns work, and I think that's something CA should invest in. How do you make things more interesting? I think AI Confederation could be something they look at. But clearly, these systems for dwarves work very, very well for Malakai. So he gets these adventures. I can't show it because, yeah, the tab only opens up after 5 turns. But here's the thing. You get all these adventures, so these give you different objectives to do with different units. And how you choose to do these objectives and which ones you focus on versus which ones you don't will change the course of your campaign. Because consider your starting position. You have some objectives over here in Norska. You have some objectives in the Cast Waste. You have objectives in Darklands. For 3 different units you can focus on. You have an objective in the Empire. So different objectives, different things to do in this campaign. But on top of that, you also have guaranteed confederation with all the other legendary lords of the dwarves. And like Karl Franz, who at the very least needs to get vision in the first place, you do not need vision. And what's great about this is you have a lot of choices in terms of who you're confederate. You might want to get Grumbrindle very quickly because of his skill line, but outside of that, who you decide to confederate and how you decide to play with these legendary lords does add a great deal to make this campaign far more dynamic than many other campaigns are in the game. I mean, this is inherently with all dwarves, but I think Malakai is better for it, partly because if you're not playing Malakai, chances are you're going to want to get him very quickly. Whereas with when you're playing Malakai, you want Grombrindle, and then you can choose who you're going to get. Though I'd probably recommend getting either Belegar or Forgrim, less so Fork. But then he also benefits from a climate standpoint because he has Frozen as well. So that means that when you Confederate Grombrindle, all of this territory over here on the campaign map opens up for you to deal with. And that adds to the sense of having a very dynamic campaign in the first place. So there's a lot of things to like with respect to this campaign, and I think it is by far and away the best campaign in the game. Maybe Maneater and Gorbad will have better campaigns when Omens of Destruction comes out, but as it currently stands, I would rate any campaign in the game based on how well they compare to Malakai's campaign. They really nailed it with this one, and I think they've set a new standard for what the campaign should be in Total War in general with this one. Just like different objectives, different things to worry about, just really great mechanics overall. It's far more interesting than so many other campaigns in the game. It's not even funny. And that's all I had to say. Christine signing out. Stay tuned for more.